Today on Talk with Claude, we interview A-Day Fox on a multi-year experience with the carnivore diet.
Although I do think that this way of eating has really helped keep me younger looking. And in fact, when I show my before and after picture, I definitely have people be like, this is a great picture, but why is your mom in there? Yeah.
All right, so I'm here with A-Day Fox, and she's going to tell us a little bit about her journey through keto. And I believe you're doing keto carnivore?
Yeah, now carnivore, but I started with keto.
Okay, so you can walk us through the development. So maybe to start with, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, your background, and even like life growing up, because I really like people to relate to a real person back there. Often when you're confronted with people's final result, there's an attitude that's like, oh, well, that worked for this person, but I'm very different, and I come from a different background or whatever, and it won't work for me. So maybe tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'd love to. I hardly ever get to tell my whole story, so this is exciting. I grew up in New York City. I was born and raised here, and I was, I guess, kind of in the 70s. I was considered like a chubby child, but in comparison to today, I was like totally normal. So I might have gotten a complex about my weight that was maybe undeserved. Yeah.
Okay, I'm actually going to stop you there. You said you were a chubby child in the 70s. So
Yeah.
you're actually older than I thought just looking at you here. So would it be
Yeah.
too indiscreet to ask for your age?
I'm 48.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
So yeah, I have aged well, and for that I am very thankful, and I owe that to my parents for sure. Although I do think that this way of eating has really helped keep me younger looking. And in fact, when I show my before and after picture, I have definitely had people be like, this is a great picture, but why is your mom in there? Yeah. So I can definitely see that I've lost a lot of years of, having lost this weight. So I'm very pleased about that for sure.
wow.
Yeah. So, but in the 70s, that was kind of that in between time where we were going from like the older way of eating to this focus on, very, very low fat. So I feel like I had a foot in both ways of eating, and I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house, and my grandmother cooked food the way she had always cooked it. And then my mom's house, there was well, she followed every possible diet trend. So, I ate everything from macrobiotic to low fat to snack wells to, just whatever. So I kind of had a foot in both worlds. And I think that uh, I I wasn't as badly affected by this low fat trend as I could have been because of my grandmother. And I also always had a taste for beef. So I really did, make every effort to get that at every eating opportunity. So I think, it certainly could have been worse, but I always had, sort of a difficult relationship with food. And I think that my weight only got worse because of the carbs and the sweets that I was eating. I did get sent, now that I'm talking to you, I do remember going to I think the diet center. I must have been like maybe 12, and they had me go on a low carb diet. But at the time I was like, wait, I can have cheeseburgers with no ketchup? Like, what do I want to do that for?
This was
So
when the low carb diet?
I think I was like 12, so that must have been 82, 83.
Wow, that was probably pretty much of ahead of its time in those years then.
Well, I think it was part of like the end of the the Atkins phase. So
Okay. So
yeah.
we're talking
So,
what, mid 90s or?
well, remember Atkins, his first book came out in 1972. Like I think he published an article in Vogue magazine, and that's what kind of started the craze. And then he published a book in 1972. and then there were a couple more editions of it that came out. So the one that you're referring to that came out in the 90s, I think that was the fourth edition. And in fact, when I used to, even before like YouTube, I used to be a part of various forums to get support on following various different diets. And I did do the Atkins diet in the 90s when it was really popular. But there was a forum of women who were saying that, you know, the fourth edition of the diet wasn't really working for them. So they started a group called Atkins 72. So this was for people who were following the 1972 version, which, because it was so early, it didn't include a lot of artificial sweeteners and various kinds of, you know, low carb products. And so it was a very, what we might now call, you know, like a very clean or a very strict kind of keto. And they also didn't raise the level of carbs the way that Atkins had said that you could. And so they all were below 20 grams and didn't use any kind of artificial products or sweeteners or anything.
Okay,
So
so the 1972 Atkins diet would have been a lot more like keto than if you're talking under 20 carbs,
it
20
was
grams of.
keto. The induction
Okay.
level was keto, what we would call keto. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can see with the popularity of every diet coming out, there's a real temptation for companies to come out with processed foods to sell to people to that would match that diet, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So so I mean, I've had a long experience with low carb, and my first experience was back in the 90s, and I did like it and I did well with it, but you know, I was like in my 20s and going out and drinking and, you know, eating whatever, and it was just, I found it too hard, you know, given like the lifestyle I was leading. So I kind of did it and it did well, but I did have some keto flu, and I was just kind of like, you know, there's so much other stuff that I want to be
was
focused
it
on.
recognized as being keto flu at that time? Because
I don't remember if they used that word, and they're
that's a term I've heard only lately with the actual keto diet, but
yeah, I don't remember. I definitely don't think that there was talk about you having a need for electrolytes or salt. Back then it was just sort of like, you know, you got to struggle through it, and then eventually it'll go away. And I don't think it ever really kind of went away for me. And then I just, you know, I didn't stick with it long enough to um, you know, to really make it work. So I kind of came back and forth, and then I um I ate low carb, but not keto. Like I, you know, I made every effort to stay under 50 grams of carbs a day, and that was good enough.
okay.
Mhm.
And so as I understand it, your mother was into a lot of diets. So was that mainly about losing weight, or did she have? Would you say she had a particular health consciousness for herself and her children, or it was mainly about losing weight for herself, and then you would basically eat what she was into eating at that point?
Well, you know, she was always trying to lose weight, and I'm sure she won't be happy me telling, you know, telling her business all about town. But you know, she's struggled to lose 150 pounds for forever. But back then, you know, she was trying to lose weight, but also it was the 70s and the 80s, and it was very popular to be like, well, not popular, but in her circles, to be sort of health conscious or vegetarian or try to get organic foods and stuff like that. So that was always part of what we did, you know, growing up. So in fact, I wasn't one of those people that had a lot of fast food, and you know, I never got that kind of stuff. But you know, so in that respect, I'm very lucky to have had, you know, really solid food growing up. But you know, there still was a lot of candy and stuff like that.
It's kind of interesting for me hearing this about the 70s and the 80s. So I'm guessing that New York would have been way ahead of. I was in Quebec City at the time, and I don't ever. I mean, I was still quite young in the early 70s, but I don't recall eating healthy as being much of a concern. People talked about losing weight, and it was back there. It would have been the start of the low fat, remove all fats from your diet, and don't concern yourself with the fact that that makes for a very high carb, high protein diet. Of
Mhm.
course, with the results we all know that that came through from that. Um, so so at that time, you were doing Atkins and all that, and you have that before and after picture of you there on the thumbnail that you sent me for the podcast, and I guess the listeners will be seeing that as well. And if you send me a copy, Ash, I can post it on the YouTube version of
Oh
our
yeah.
podcast
I
here.
will.
But so I'm
And I
wondering
really
at
think that before picture was taken in Montreal.
oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So at that time, in the 70s and 80s, what would you say your weight was like? Did you gain that weight later on and then lost it, or you said you were pretty much a chubby kid? Like, what are we talking about? Because your mother obviously had some weight issues as well, as I understand.
Yeah, I mean, probably I was carrying an extra 15 pounds, so it wasn't crazy, but
Oh,
um, yeah. But at the time, it felt like a lot because everyone was so skinny. So it felt like it was, a lot, but it wasn't really in comparison, now to kids now.
okay.
Yeah.
So kind of leaving the Atkins diet and being more of a party girl at one point. So is that when you put on the extra pounds?
Actually, no, it was probably more recently. I had uh, actually twice in my life I put on that weight. And it was during very challenging times with my like career or with school. So in grad school, I had actually put on quite a lot of weight. And then I moved to Amsterdam and I, yeah, I moved to Amsterdam and I just kind of stopped worrying about my weight and it just kind of took care of itself. I was walking around a lot and then riding a bike and, just meeting people and getting out. And so it just kind of took care of itself. But then the last time was in, I believe it was 2011. I had a really difficult job and a really difficult boss. And, through that experience, I like started eating and, yeah, my weight just ballooned up very quickly.
Yeah, so I think we need to pause on that a little bit because that's something that I've been through the studying I've been doing. As you know, I'm a health and keto coach.
Mhm.
I've got a background in physical activity science, which was my first background working as a coach in martial arts and outdoor activities. And I took more of an approach with the diet. And recently, I've actually started studying cognitive behavioral therapy for a concern that dealing with clients, I've noticed the effects of stress is a big blind spot in the diet industry, in my opinion. I mean, there's definitely some coaches out there and some information out there that takes a more holistic approach. But if anything, there's really two hormones that really drive the health or the lack thereof, and that would be insulin and cortisol. And cortisol being heavily associated with stressful events, and it really works as a vicious circle, right? So the cortisol raise your blood sugar. The blood sugar will make it so that you have cravings, and then you want to eat more sugar, and then it's easy for it to go downhill from there. And a recent experiment I've had, much of against my will, but I had some health issues in the fall there, and the doctors put me on prednisone, which basically simulates cortisol. And it took about 2 weeks to lose about 2 years of keto dieting. In 2 weeks, I must have put on 25 pounds. And it didn't
Wow.
feel like I was eating that much more, but pretty much everything I was eating was being converted to fat because of the drug. And because most of the energy that I was consuming was going to fat, I was hungry all the time and I was having cravings, because that if if you're eating something, most of it's converted to fat, then you just don't have it available as energy. So you're still craving more energy, right? So it really works against you. Luckily, I've tapered off of it now. And as I tapered off, the weight just started coming off again like magic. So it really shows the influence that cortisol can have. So it's not just insulin. So that's why the mental state and working through emotional difficulties is super, super important in diet. And we see it, I kind of point to that as one of the main reasons why we see so much obesity later in life with people that were relatively fit in their teens and their 20s, and they take on a lot more responsibility. They have kids, a family, and all of a sudden all the stress comes in and they figure it's just part of aging, right? But if you take care of those issues, you can certainly maintain fitness and a healthy body weight through your later years. So that's kind of
Well,
what I'm working
yeah.
on at the time.
I mean, I definitely was not what you would call fit in my younger years. I mean, I started smoking cigarettes when I was 13. You know, I'd hang out and we'd go drinking and stuff like that. So you know, I was healthy, but, you know, that was by luck, you know, not by my own work.
Did you have to hide the cigarettes from your mother?
She smoked. I mean, but back then in the 80s, you know, kind of everybody smoked. So, you know, I was allowed to smoke at home. It wasn't like people were happy about it, but it just, that's what, you know, people did that.
It's a weird thing thinking about that now, right? Because I used to smoke with my mother too at age 13,
Yeah.
and
And man,
nowadays,
how many times was
I
I sent to go buy cigarettes from my mom? Like starting when I was 8, I was
yeah.
sent down to the bodega and it was no big deal.
Yeah, well, I had a beard at 13. They make them hairy where I'm from, so I had no problem walking into a place and buying either beers or cigarette, even as a teen. But I don't know if it's the same thing in New York, but I know out here in most places in Canada, I know in BC, they've completely outlawed smoking in restaurants and bars. And that
Yeah.
came about in about the year 2000. And it was unimaginable for us before the year 2000 to even think that you would outlaw cigarettes in bars, because the two just went hand in hand, right?
Yeah.
And then they did it and they thought, you know, it would be total loss of business and all that. And it turned out it actually brought back a lot of businesses to the bar. A lot of people have stopped going just because they didn't want to smell like an ashtray coming out of there. So,
Yeah.
so I mean,
No, it's like
going,
here too. I think it was 2003 that we passed that law. So
yeah, going back now, it's hard to imagine going to a bar and having, you know, more smoke from the cigarettes and the smoke machine on those dance floors.
yeah,
But that's how it was, right? So
yeah. But I think that I didn't, you know, I've spent a lot of time actually thinking about how one handles stressful situations. And I think that especially since I started smoking so early, I relied on cigarettes and food to kind of handle any of my stressful issues. And, you know, I would rely on one or the other more at different points in time, but those were the ways that I handled it. And so when I quit smoking, you know, of course I gained a ton of weight because, you know, then I'm relying on the other thing. And eventually, you know, I kind of quit both, but going into keto, it really laid bare all of, you know, how much I was using sugar, and I couldn't, you know, that couldn't be hidden anymore. So I really was required to kind of learn new coping techniques and learn to, you know, sort of handle my emotions without food.
oh, that's interesting because the people I deal with, by the time they come to me, they already are fairly health conscious, and I haven't dealt with smokers. They've quit the smokers long before they come and see me, and that makes me think because you know, quickening smoking has always been associated with putting on weight.
Hmm.
And I actually never put the two together. But obviously, if you're using smoking as a way to cope with stress, and you stop smoking,
Hmm.
and then you might be dealing with a lot more stress from quitting smoking, plus the stress that the smoking was covering up. And then if your cortisol levels go up, that would certainly explain. It's hypothetical because I don't have a research on it, but it would make a really good basis for a research project for sure.
Well, I'm sure that's correct. And also, cigarettes, the nicotine releases it releases blood sugar, you know, into your bloodstream, and so that's why you get a little pick me up too when you smoke. And so, of course, that raises your insulin levels as well. because you're releasing that sugar. So your metabolism actually is a little bit faster when you smoke. So when you quit, you maybe burn about 200 calories less per day. So I mean, that's not huge, but if you're eating kind of indiscriminately, that definitely accounts for that 10 pounds that you gain when you quit smoking.
Right.
And then if you're using it emotionally, then there's another 40 pounds. Yeah.
For sure. Um, so before you went on this latest diet that obviously worked really well for you, what was your physical activity like? Are you somebody who exercises, goes running, I don't know, either the gym or whatever? Was that something you did before as well? And what did
Yeah,
you
I
transition
mean,
into now?
yeah, I mean, I've paid for the gym for a long, long time, but I didn't really work out all that much. I mean, there were periods of my life where I would get there like 3 times a week, and I didn't know. I never knew what to do in the what I call the testosterone room. So I never went in there, and basically just kind of got on the machine, and I would do that for a bit, and that was kind of it. So I didn't really know what to do. And actually, I remember when I was in college, I was working out with my brother, and he was kind of showing me like the chest press, and he didn't put any weights on the bar, and just had the bar, and I was trying to push it up and I couldn't do it. And I said, stop screwing around, like let go of the bar. You're making this hard. And he's like, I'm not touching it. And I'm like, stop messing with me. Like, let go, get away. And he's like, I'm not touching it. And I was like, are you kidding me? I can't even move this bar. So that was and he was like really embarrassed for me, and I'm like, wait a minute, I've never done this before. But yeah, so that was about my experience with weights. And I really didn't get beyond that. It really wasn't until I had started losing weight on keto that I sort of took baby steps with working out. And in the past, like when I would try to work out, I'd and lose weight, I always kind of came to the workout or I came to the diet with the idea that I'm gonna like be really restrictive and only eat 1,000 calories and work out at the gym for 2 hours every day and do all of that. And of course, that never worked at any point in the past. And so this latest effort, I kind of decided that, this was it. Everything I had ever done like never worked. So I decided I was going to go against every instinct that I had and just kind of, just go with it and just let it happen and not be really hard on myself. So I started the diet and I kind of went with that until I had lost about 30 pounds. And I decided I was just going to wait to work out until I felt like working out. And at my top weight, I was pretty heavy, and I had a lot of knee problems. So my knees really hurt going up and down the stairs.
Give me some numbers here. So
I was 246 pounds at my top weight.
246. And
Yeah, and I'm
how
5'7".
tall are you?
5'7".
Okay, so
Yeah,
that's quite a bit.
yeah. And I live in New York, so I take the subway every day, and I live in a walk up, so I took the stairs all the time, and my knees were just killing me. And it got to the point where, like, if in my house, and if I were in a place where there weren't a lot of people, I would go down the stairs backwards because that hurts the knees less.
Wow.
I don't know if you know that.
But you wouldn't do that when people were looking.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one thing, and I find that really sad for some aspect, because obviously you had been trying for a long time, right? And the shame that we put on people with extra weight. And as a kid, I was 225 pounds at 10 years old. I was quite a heavy kid, and I remember being teased. I remember being called fatso by our school principal in front of everybody. Something that would get anybody fired in the school district nowadays, and probably some more accusations. But yeah, back then it was just like, yeah, if you take a fat person, you start to insult him, somehow you'll make him lose weight, right? because he's not trying. Now at 10 years old, you have to put some blame on the parents, and you also have to put some blame on the information, because I think for a long time, and this was the case with me, um, there was a lot of bad information. And if you tried your hardest to follow what the mainstream was telling people in order to lose weight, you'd probably put some more weight on. Eat small meals regularly throughout the day, and cut fats, so you end up
Hmm.
eating healthy grains all day long, and stuff like that. So I find that extremely sad for somebody who has been overweight and who has dealt with weight issues as well. I lost a lot of weight through exercise for a period, and then that became a lot harder in my later years as I went through the stressful situations, and less time to work out and all that with kids and work and so on. So yeah, I mean, thanks for sharing that. I mean, I feel something really deep inside hearing somebody, if nobody's watching, you're going to spare your knees by going downstairs backwards. But there was so much shame oriented towards that you wouldn't dare spare your knees if people were watching. I mean, that's really a sad state of affair, and I mean socially, and I don't mean specifically for you.
Yeah, for sure it is. And I, like you, feel like I I did have bad information, and there were times when I put a tremendous amount of effort into losing weight, and I was doing all of these things that weren't working, counting calories, trying to eat multiple meals, throughout the day, like fasting or eating like grapefruit at odd times or all of those things. I've tried every diet. So I do feel like I really put a lot of work into it and didn't get out of it what I should have. So this time I decided I was just gonna I was going to let my body decide what I was going to do. And so, I decided to wait until I started to feel like exercising. So once I lost about 30 pounds, I did start to feel like, oh, I'm kind of ready to move. I kind of want to move. I felt ready to do it. And then it took like 2 more weeks. And every day it was like, oh, I'm going to get up go to the gym. Or every night it'd be like, I'm going to go to the gym in the morning. And in the morning it was like, I don't feel like it. So finally, I decided, okay, I'm going to make it so easy. All I have to do is go in, scan my key fob, and then I can leave and go home and go to bed. And so I made that commitment. So the next day, I was like, all right, I'm just going to go and scan my key fob. But once I was there, I was like, well, I'm here. I may as well do something. And then I said, I only have to spend 5 minutes on a machine, then I can go home and go to bed. And so I get on the machine, and after 5 minutes, it's like, this is all right, and I keep going. So most mornings I would keep going, but there were definitely mornings that I went, scanned my key fob, and I went home. And there were days when I just did 5 minutes on the machine. But, after a while, like, of doing it, and I also, what I did differently this time was make a commitment that I was going to work out to, what is it, like 70% of my heart rate. So whatever that number was, I did not let any exercise I was doing exceed that. And so every time I'd worked out in the past, I always felt like I was supposed to go and go and go and go and really, like, bust my butt. But that's kind of exhausting, and I never wanted to do it. But when I decided to just work out to that heart rate, then it was like I was a little winded, but not so bad. And then I was kind of like, oh, this is okay. Like, I could keep doing this. Like, this isn't so bad. So once I started doing that, I was more willing to go, and then began to look forward to it. And then eventually I decided I wanted to lift weights. And then I ventured over to the testosterone room, and and I really started doing it. And I did my research at night and read, watched the YouTube videos and tried to learn the form and all of that. And then I would go to the gym and I would try these different things. And so for a long time, I was doing that. But the evolution of my activity, I went a lot slower, and I think that was to my benefit to do it that way.
Yeah, so I think that's great wisdom to share with the audience, and people listening. It's the old adage of baby steps, right? So you're way better off doing something small that may not help a lot, but at least you're doing something. It's one more step in the right direction. And as
Mhm.
you take steps in the right direction, it opens up the door to more steps. Whereas
Yeah.
if you just stay in bed, then it's you're not moving at all, right? And there's no momentum in not moving, except the momentum for not moving. Because that gets very addictive, not moving. Now, you talked that in your youth you were the optics of the people around you was to, a lot of people were thin, and so you wanted to stay thin. How would you say, before we get right into your present diet, you've shared with us, the evolution of as you lost a bit of weight, because 30 pounds compared to the total amount that you lost isn't the biggest percentage, but it's a
Mhm.
step in the right direction. But just losing that initial weight allowed you to go out and do the exercise. Now that must have an impact on your relationships as well, right? If you're going out, you're feeling a bit more confident. Maybe whether people are looking or not, you don't need to go downstairs backwards.
Yeah.
So that completely changes your how you relate to the world around you and the people around you. So how would you say that's evolved throughout the years before you got a lot fitter and now?
Well, so much changed. I mean, your body is like how you move through the world. And I didn't realize how much I had changed how I move through the world. So once I lost the weight, I still didn't really get a good sense of the size of my body. So I'd like at a restaurant, when the tables and chairs are all really close, I'd sort of be like trying to ease through as if I were a much bigger person. And then it was like, oh, I don't have to turn sideways. Like I
I,
can go straight through. There's plenty of room.
I'm guessing
And
it's better than the other way around, though.
yeah, well, that's true. Or I'd catch my reflection in the mirror and I'd think, oh wow, I look really thin here. And I remember saying something like that. Like I was looking through some pictures with somebody and I said, oh my, I look really thin in this picture. And they were like, you are thin. Like, what are you talking about? And, so getting it in my head is, that's it's a different story. So, that's been harder. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting is as I started to lose the weight, I wanted to be more active. It wasn't hard to get myself to be active. And I think that our bodies are naturally made to move. And so once you remove the thing that causes pain and discomfort, we want to move, we want to be active in some way or other. So I work with people too, helping them to lose weight. And when you're 250 pounds, like it just doesn't seem conceivable. And I have to, tell people like it really is true. If you're 100 pounds less, like you would want to go, maybe not running, but maybe you'd want to go out to the club and dance all night. Maybe you would want to take a belly dancing class. You would be interested in signing up for the trapeze class or going hiking. Like it's not hard to envision yourself doing those things. So that's the one thing I would tell your listeners is you'll want to do this stuff. You just gotta trust.
And would it be fair to say too is, as you're getting thinner and fitter, because it's not just about the thinness or the actual number on the scale, but a lot has to do with, you look at yourself in the mirror and you see somebody who's healthy compared to
Hmm.
what you saw before, you start to like what you see. And so there's a real temptation there to show it off a little bit, right? And I think maybe you avoided my question a little bit. You brought in some good information, but as far as relating to people or showing confidence, New York has a pretty nice summer where people dress down a little bit, and that makes a huge difference. And maybe one thing I want to address too, which really surprised me because I lost 75 pounds on keto, and I mean that's quite a bit. I'm 5'10", and I had quite a bit of that around the belly. And one of my fears, obviously, losing that much weight is that you get all that flabby skin, and so you don't look too bad in jeans and a couple of layers of shirts and stuff like that, but you may not be all that keen to go out on the beach. but I was surprised, especially with the combining the fasting and keto together, how much everything just really tightens up, and you have a quick loss of weight, and you'll get a little bit of looser skin, but it does go away. It seems to get eaten up, and things tighten up, and you can see that six pack again. It was quite surprising to me. It wasn't what I expected, especially I'm 49, so it's not like the skin's as tight as in your 20s, right? So you wouldn't expect it to be. So I was just kind of wondering if you could talk to that, and talk to what your relationship, either by your own building confidence through it, and how what people saw as well. I think it's sad to say, but people don't react the same when you're weighing close to 300 pounds, or when you're when you look really fit and pretty and all that. Let's be honest with that.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say that's true. And it took me a while to feel more confident to sort of show things off. And I'm not sure that I ever really, showed things off like that. But um, I did make a commitment to myself at the time that I would start an online dating profile when once I had hit 50 pounds lost. So I did do that, and I did that at I think the beginning of the summer, and the summer of 2016. So yeah, so I went out a lot, and I had fun, and it was interesting, and I met a lot of like random different people that I wouldn't normally meet. So that was pretty cool. Um, and it was, I guess I had felt like I was too heavy to really be able to do a lot of dating. But the world, I guess, has changed around me. So the idea in my mind, the last time I was doing like a lot of dating, I kind of was too heavy. But now, fast forward into the teens, and well, a lot of people are very heavy. So it's just sort of normal, and so it wasn't really a big deal. Not in the way that I kind of thought it was going to be a big deal. So
So you're saying that you got thinner while the standard got fatter.
yes, exactly. So
It's one way to hit your percentile, I guess.
yeah.
So while
So
we're on the subject, what's your status now?
well, I am single again, but I had dated someone else long term from after that summer, but when we broke up recently. So
Well,
yeah.
you heard it here first to the audience. This lovely lady here, 48,
Hmm.
single and available.
Yeah. So, but I think it was a good experience, and I'm glad that I kind of waited a little bit because it gave me a little bit more confidence, and I felt more comfortable. And the one thing I did notice about the dating, at the beginning of it, I'm always making these, crazy sort of rules for myself, but I was going to try to do 100 dates in 100 days, which is totally ridiculous. But I did do like maybe three a week, and that was a lot, and it was actually kind of a challenge. And so then I kind of started having us meet at the same restaurant or the same bar, so at least like I was going to the same place, and I kind of had a little bit of a rhythm. But it did cause a little bit of a hiccup in the weight loss, because even if you're having one drink with each person, that's still a lot of drinks, and it was more alcohol than I was drinking during my weight loss journey.
So just to be clear, this is 100 dates with 100 different people in
that
100 days.
that was the idea.
See, I don't think I've had 100 dates in my entire life.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I thought it would be fun, just kind of, and I figured it was a numbers game. Like it's, these apps are, they match you with whoever, but it's just a numbers game. You just got to meet more people.
Maybe I'm not up with the times, but I think only women can even aspire to that.
Yes, that's true. I think that's true. Although I think there's a lot more people on it who are not actually ready or available to date. So at first I was like trying to have like honest conversations with the people who were like writing to me. But after a while it's like, I don't want to talk for like weeks on end. Like either let's go for coffee or a drink or you're not available. And getting people to like pin down and say, okay, I'll meet you on Tuesday at 6 o'clock at this place. That was actually more difficult than I expected. And I was like, what is the deal here? I'll pay for my own coffee. Like if this is a money thing, but I don't know.
Well,
So
I would be in a lot of trouble going back on the scene. Hearing people talk about it terrifies me. It's so foreign to what I knew back then. I mean, there was no internet last time I dated like that. That was like
yeah,
20 years ago now. I've been with my spouse. So,
yeah.
yeah, you seem to be having a fun time with it. And,
Yeah.
in my failure to keep up with the time, if I can pass on a bit of wisdom, and that has to do with bettering yourself, whether it's through diet, exercise, mental exercise, learning new things. I think whether you're trying to match up with new people or you're trying to better yourself within a couple, I think if you a couple people match up with people at their level, right? So if you're getting yourself fit and healthy and you're doing intelligent things and you present yourself well, I think it gives you access to a lot higher quality people. And that's saying a lot, because it makes a huge difference if you hook up and you decide to go for long-term relationships eventually with somebody of high quality. It can be life-changing. And if you let yourself go and you don't believe in yourself, and um, the way you perceive yourself is so low that you're not looking for those high quality people in your life, it can really wreck your life too. So
Mhm.
it's not like these little things that we make in changes that we make in our lives don't have an impact on our future. So again, making those baby steps in the right direction, I think is really key. So let's talk about what you do now that's really worked for you, and how long did you make the latest change? You said you were on keto first and then eventually went on a fully carnivore diet. So if you could describe that a little bit for the audience. I I think people are starting to kind of get what keto is, and obviously there's got more of a dirty processed food keto, and there's more of a clean keto. But I think still today when I talk about the carnivore diet, it's people kind of have that question mark expression on their face, like, what do you mean carnivore diet? So they have a hard time wrapping their heads around not eating any vegetables and plant matter at all. So
Yeah.
maybe you can talk to that.
Well, I started this particular weight loss journey in September of 2015, and so then it really kind of went well. And this was like the first time that I had ever lost a large amount of weight, and now this is also the first time I've kept it off.
Okay,
But
just
mhm.
before you go too far, so before that 2015 where you say, okay, I'm going to start, and I guess it was keto at the time, were you on any diet preceding, or it was one of those periods where you kind of let yourself go a little bit and you're like, okay, I got to take the horse by the rein here and take control again?
Yeah.
um, so I guess that's one thing. And kind of describe what made you choose that over. I mean, right now there's a lot of different, you could have gone plant-based, or you could have gone
Oh, I've
vegan,
done.
or whatever it is. So I'm just kind of wondering what made you decide to go the keto way.
Well, I mean, I have done tons of different types of diets, and I had tried plant based, and that McDougall book, the McDougall doctor. I've done his program, and none of that stuff ever worked. And so this low carb was really the only thing that had kind of worked in the past, and that I hadn't felt like really hungry and uncomfortable on it. So that was kind of why I went back to it in the first place. Yeah. So, I started in September of 2015, and before that, I wasn't, on any particular program, and I had it, I guess, in the previous year or two, tried a bunch of different things, but I just didn't stick with it. The stuff would last a week or two, and then it was all over. And I actually went to my brother's wedding. He got married in Montreal, and it was like a freakishly hot weekend that weekend. So it was like 100 degrees, and there's no air conditioner anywhere, and I guess like that's just not common to have air conditioners in Canada. So it was August and super hot, and there was nothing, and I was so uncomfortable.
This is
And
where Montreal.
yeah, so
Montreal does get very hot in the summer.
yeah, well, it was super hot. It was like 100 degrees, and they got married I guess it's what normally is like a ski village during the winter, but it's got like a lodge and like sort of pretty place, but it was really really hot, and there was no air conditioning and no fans or anything like that, and so just that experience had just was a wake up call. And I think in the center of town there's like a big hill or a mountain or something like that, and there's like a vista at the top where you climb up and you look around, and it's really pretty. But the climbing up it, I thought I was going to die. And but meanwhile, like there's some great grandfathers like, come on kids, let's go, keep up. And I'm just like, oh my god, these people are passing me, and it was terrible. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't live like this anymore. So that was really kind of when I decided, when I got home, that I was going to find something. And so that's when I got started. And so I went on. I did I kind of started with a different program, but it morphed into keto, and then I really did well. Now that first week of keto, like I was white knuckling it. I mean, it was so hard coming off of sugar, and it was really really difficult, and it took a while, I think, for me to get fat adapted.
And
And
sorry, where so did you just go on the previous information that you already knew and kind of did it on your own, or did you like pick up a new book, or follow videos on YouTube, or actually hire a coach, or what was that transition there?
I mean, I had my Fitness Pal, and I just tried to eat so that my hard cutoff was 50 grams of carbs a day, but I aimed to be somewhere around 30 or 35, and that was it.
So your
So
Fitness Pal, that's an app?
my Fitness Pal, yeah, it's an app
Okay.
for tracking food, yeah. So that was it, and so in time I started to be more curious about the diet and how it worked and everything, and so I did some more research. And I don't know if you remember back in 2015, like there was no information, hardly any information. There were a few presentations on YouTube that some of the doctors gave at various scientific conferences, but there really wasn't much information. So I devoured that whatever information there was, but I was kind of like a trailblazer, so to speak. So
Yeah, you're definitely early on.
mhm,
I mean, 2015, there would have been a bunch of kids with epilepsy doing it.
mhm.
Potentially, there would have been maybe Dr. Mercola. Um, what's his
Well, there
name?
was Dr. Westman. I mean, that was what I looked at. And then Diet Doctor, that website was, I think, just getting started like in 2016. So, there were a few videos on there, but there, and I think maybe Amy Berger had her website or her blog, but there wasn't a lot of information. So I was kind of figuring it out along the way. And but I was feeling so much better. I mean, once I got through the whole sugar thing, I was feeling so much better that I knew that this was going to be the way that I ate. That there might be some adjustments and some changes, but I wasn't going to feel any better eating any other way. So, that was kind of that. And then over time, how did I get to carnivore? I mean, after I lost the weight, I continued to watch videos and learn about what people were doing. And in fact, I had learned about carnivore, I think it was 2008 or 2009, because over the years, I have always sort of stayed, reading up on different blogs and stuff or different forums about ways that people lose weight. So whatever my way is at the time, that's what I read. But, you come across all kinds of stuff when you're looking for, those sorts of forums. So somehow I came across, people who were doing a zero carb diet. And that's what they called it back then. And I came upon the forum, and it was like, at the time I was like, this is like crazy. But, I read it, and I followed up for like 6 months reading it. And then I just decided, I don't know, I can't do this. And so eventually, though, in the low carb circles, I saw Amber O'Hearn would give her presentations about how low carb, like, healed her bipolar disorder and all of that. And so over the years, I've heard her speak and been interested in wanting to try it. And it wasn't until, I guess it was December of 2017, that I finally was like, okay, let me give this a real try and actually do it. And once I did it, it was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that this really would have this much of an impact. And then, it took a while to really kind of get over this idea that I wasn't killing myself by not eating vegetables. But once I did, it was kind of like, okay, this is how I'm going to eat.
So I'm just curious as to, uh, by the sounds of things, the keto diet was working well for you. So I'm just kind of wondering what the extra motivation to go completely zero carb would have been for you. What was it? Just mainly just a curiosity as to, how far you could push it, or did you feel like the keto diet was doing well for you, but there was still something that wasn't as well as good as you were hoping, and then you thought that maybe that would help?
So the keto diet was great for losing weight, but it did not help with some of my other stuff. And so things like inflammation and, all of my allergies and things. And I'd heard people say that it did that for them. So I was always kind of looking and trying to figure out why I wasn't getting those kind of results. And so going carnivore, it helped a lot with my allergies. And so for years, I had been taking, Flonase and Benadryl and Sudafed and Claritin and what's the other one? I don't know, but those were the four that I regularly took, and then throwing in other stuff along the way. So I never got my allergies and stuff resolved. And then in addition to that, I have eczema, and I've been like in a continuous flare up for years now that, really hasn't been resolved. And then I also had undiagnosed asthma, and I didn't get fully diagnosed with that until 2018, the January 2018. So, those things didn't resolve on keto. And then going on carnivore, the allergies and stuff, that went away. And after about 6 months, I ran out of something. I didn't get to it right away. And then like nothing happened. And so I kept not taking it. And then I kept being fine.
And this was for the inflammation or for the eczema?
Well, this was for just the allergies, runny eyes,
Okay. Yeah.
that kind of stuff. And then for the asthma in May of 2019, so just 6 or 7 months ago, I stopped having all dairy. And, within 2 weeks, like my breathing was just, it was phenomenal, the change. And I didn't want that to be, because I do like cheese like everybody else. So I had a bunch of cheese that I had just recently bought, so I kept testing it and taking out, testing it and taking it out, and it was clear that the cheese was a major problem. And so finally, after the last test, I was like, okay, this is it. I'm never going to have dairy again. So now I don't have to use an asthma inhaler, and that's that's huge. That's really significant for me. And I'd been struggling for a while with with being able to breathe. So it was bad.
So with dairy, there's generally two aspects of the dairy that people react negatively to. So there's the lactose, which is the sugar in dairy, which without certain enzymes, there's a portion of the population that cannot digest that as adults. And then there's the casein, which is the protein in the dairy whey, um, that usually has a lot to do with the leaky gut syndrome, that with allergies and stuff. Were you able to identify which of the two or both were causing you problems, or you just identified dairy as in general, or do you know?
I did not identify which was the problem, and I didn't really care. But I have always disliked milk and yogurt, and I didn't really like a lot of cheeses when I was growing up either. So I, over time, following the carnivore diet, it requires you to kind of pay attention to your own body signals. And once I let go of this idea that there's a type of food that is healthy for me, that even if I don't like it, it is healthy for me and I must have it. As I started listening to my body and letting my body's taste determine what I eat, um, I realized that there's foods that I've never liked and that have always been a problem, and so I think dairy is one of those. So I don't know what it is about it. Over the years, I've always said I was lactose intolerant because that's something that people seem to understand, but I don't know if that was it or if it was something else. But it's always been a problem. And then eggs is also a problem. And I think starting when I was about 10, I found that they made me super nauseous, and it probably took me another 15 years before I could eat eggs without feeling really nauseous. And then I ate them a lot. And then once I went carnivore, like I started to not feel great with them. And it was kind of like, I need to take this out. It's not, it's not suitable for me.
Okay, so we're starting to get a fairly good idea of what the diet's like for you. So no vegetables, no dairy, no eggs.
Mhm.
So tell us of some of the things you do eat.
Well, I do post everything, most everything on Instagram. So I part of the reason why I did that was like when I first decided to start this carnivore thing, it was hard to envision what a meal looks like without having like vegetables or spices or all this other stuff in it. And I felt like there weren't that many people for me to look at and kind of get a sense of what a meal is. So I just decided to start taking pictures and at least provide that for people who might be coming behind me. So if you look through, you'll see like a steak or a hamburger, or bacon with the steak or the hamburger. It's recently I made oxtails. That was pretty awesome. I've made pork belly. So some kind of hunk of meat
Do you
and
do
salt.
organ meats as well?
So I have off and on, and I feel like it's probably a good idea. I have a hard time with the texture of liver, so I've been making pate, and that's actually been pretty good, and I kind of like it. But I haven't made that in a while. But that was the best way for me to go about doing it. I had heart. I decided I don't like it. So,
You have to
yeah,
get pretty creative sometimes.
yeah,
When Yeah, and I had no problems with the texture of liver until I started making pate. Now I don't want to go back to just liver because I enjoy my pate so much.
yeah.
So we use strands of pork belly, make them nice and crispy, and spread the liver pate on it. So
Ah, there you go.
there's our crackers.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I would make meatloaf and slice it really thin and use that like a toast point.
Yeah, and I found the heart, if you make it in the crock pot and you slice it really thin, you
Hmm.
can have it in through broth, like make a soup out of it, and it's not too bad. It's like I mean, it depends, but I'm pretty good with those things. Like for me, I've been on and off with the carnivore diet. I'm back to keto now. I actually appreciate having a bit more variety in vegetables, but um, I've got ulcerative colitis, and when I have flare-ups, the way I kind of get rid of the flare-ups is to go fully carnivore.
Mm.
And that's pretty good. Going back to vegetables doesn't really activate my flare-ups. I'll usually get flare-ups if, I remember at work, if everybody's starting to get sick and all that. Well, I won't get what they have. I'll just have a flare-up. So, uh, dealing with a hyperactive immune system for various reasons, and maybe that'll be a subject for a podcast for some other day.
Mhm. Yeah.
Max, what would you say if you were to name, your top three benefits of eating this way? What would you say they are? And then talk a little bit about the drawbacks.
Well, I would say the healing. I mean, I've said in my Instagram bio that I came to carnivore for the weight loss and I stayed for the healing. So I feel 1,000 times better than I ever have before, and I don't see myself achieving better health than this way. So that is definitely the one of the benefits. It's cheap. I know people think that eating more meat is expensive, but it is not. Especially, where I live, broccoli is the same amount per pound that is a hamburger. So, it's expensive. So I don't think that eating vegetable items is cheaper. And then I guess what would the third benefit be? I don't know. I feel so great, and it's cheap. But the drawbacks would be, I guess, socializing. I mean, I'm now out of that stage where I want to be like, hanging out at the club or the bar and drinking a lot and all of that. So without alcohol, I think it's far easier to make gains in terms of your health.
It's
Sorry,
New York.
New York.
So as far as drawbacks, how do you, like, I can name a few drawbacks that are maybe a bit more specific that I can think of. Um, Eating is very social, right? So when you're eating in a group and you have a very restrictive diet, um, especially if you're going out to the restaurant with a group of people, that can be like for me, it was particularly bad because it had direct impact on my colitis, right? So it's one thing to say, well, if I eat that, I'm going to gain a few pounds, or it's going to break me out of ketosis, and then it'll take me a few days to get back into it. But if it triggers some kind of colitis flare up, or if break out in a rash or something like that, or you start to get asthma, I mean, that's much more of a problem. So I can think the social aspect to me was difficult. Now, as we get further into the times, we find more and more people eating this way, so we tend to gather around with the people that have made that change, and makes things that much easier. I guess the worst case scenario would be a bunch of carnivore eaters and vegans trying to eat together at a table. You can see where the conversations would go with that, right?
Yeah,
So that
yeah.
that that can be sometimes a little tough. So I don't know if you've had those experience. Also, um, like how often you eat. See, like there's a real benefit to being able to fast. I know
Um,
if I'm on carnivore or keto, I can basically eat one time a day if I've got stuff to do. It's a little harder if on a day I'm home, because with people eating and preparing really nice smelling food in the house all day long, it makes it a little harder not to get tempted. But if I'm out working, I don't have the drop in energy. I can just keep going. I eat when I get home in the evening, and that's totally fine. That being said, if you want to kind of meet people to eat, then you kind of have to time it. And when you're with people that eat 5 times or 6 times a day, that makes it a bit difficult. So how do you cope with those challenges?
Well, um, I have tried to find other activities to do with adults that don't involve food. I think it's really hard, especially in a city where, just about every activity revolves around food. I just decided I was going to have to, kind of get over that. And I just wasn't going to eat at every eating opportunity. So, so that's one thing. You kind of got to set your mind around, how you want to be around food, and not eat at every time it's presented to you. But I try to like set up trips to go hiking, or to like go and do something, where you're moving around and you're not just sitting and eating. Now, the people I'm with are, more or less interested in doing that. Most people do just want to go and sit and eat. So it's been a little bit hard to get people up and going, but there you go.
Yeah, and
Um,
mind you, even if you're going hiking with people that are running on carbs, you'll be stopping every couple of hours or every hour to, oh, I've got to sit down and have a snack now.
yeah,
And I do a lot of ski touring and mountaineering and stuff like that, and yeah, that's certainly a thing. Like I'll have a coffee in the morning, and then I'll go for climb a mountain all day, sometimes 4 or 5 hours, and I don't need to take a break because of the way I'm fueled. And
yeah,
yeah, and then it really breaks the rhythm, to be with people that need to stop and eat all the time. But it
yeah.
makes a good opener for conversation, though, because they can see you can keep going and you don't seem tired, because it really builds endurance.
Yeah.
um you know and sorry, you were gonna say something else.
Um, well, let's see. I don't have a set number of times to eat in a day. I don't seem to do too well with once a day, but I have been experimenting lately with longer extended fasts, so like 72 hours. And I've sort of pulled together a group of us who start Sunday nights and fast, well, people sort of do as much or as little as they want to, but we try to start at the same time. And so that's been really cool. And in fact, fasting has been the next level of sort of dealing with my eating for emotional reasons, because once you take out food completely, it's like, wow, so I just got to deal with life, without any crutch. And it's actually been a really good experience, so I'm really pleased that I've done that, and I'm plan on continuing to do it. So the nice thing, like you said, with keto and with carnivore, is you can go really long periods without eating. And so I would regularly go, maybe 6 or 7 hours before you start thinking about food, and then maybe another couple of hours before I'm actually able to do it. So I would say probably 2 meals a day, the 2 meals are pretty close to each other, so there'll be long periods. Yeah.
Okay, and what's the longest fast that you've done?
um I think as far as I've gotten was like 112 hours, so
Wow.
that's like 4.5 days. Yeah.
That's great. Can you describe that in a bit more detail, like the stages that you go through? Because I'll admit to something. I do quite a bit of intermittent fasting. I do the one meal a day with ease. For me to go more than that, I'd have to leave the house. Because and it's not because I'll eat when I'm hungry kind of thing, and that brings it down to about after I've gone one day, I can if there's food that smells really good, and my wife is on the keto as well, and so she's cooking up things that I know I can eat, and it's it's a real draw. But I have had friends that, tell me that I should try to go further, that there'd be some real health benefits. I've studied that, and I'm really tempted with it. Unfortunately, contextually, by the time I've done one day, I feel pretty good, and I'm tempted to eat. But if you could describe that in a bit more detail as to, because I know there's real stages to it, and they say even like once you get past, I think it's 72 hours, you've basically almost replaced the entire immune system.
Yeah.
So what are
Yeah.
there's the technical aspect of it, but as somebody who's done it, if you could tell us, a bit how that feels and what you go through when you do that long a fast.
Well, I can't feel autophagy happening if that's what you're thinking about. So when I go that long fast, like I assume my immune system is being, replaced, but there's nothing to feel or know whether that's happening. It is a little bit, it is hard. I would say it is hard. Now, the thing with fasting is that I've found is that, hunger is not the problem. The battle is up here. It's not in the stomach. And so once I accept that, I realize that, I assume that I'm going to be like ravenous all the time, but I'm never feeling more hungry than I felt after, 5 hours after my last meal. So it's not, it's not a terrible physical feeling, but there's that mental desire to eat. And what I find is when I'm fasting, like I don't sleep as much. So if I go to bed at midnight, I wake up at 4:30 and I'm just up. And I find that all of this time, like not eating, I'm not like with people as I'm not eating, and I'm up super early, and it's just a lot of time with myself. I'm just kind of like, I don't want to be with myself and in my head anymore. And there's something about eating that like kind of takes you out of your head. I don't know if that makes sense. Um, so it's a little bit, it definitely is a practice. Like I can see why there's, the spiritual aspect. And I think that too is what kind of started me paying attention to my, what my body is saying. Because I think with keto, we get so wrapped up with what are the correct macros and how much of this should I be having. And I tried PKD for a while, that Paleo Medicina clinic, like they're 2 to 1 fat to protein. And, and I feel like, I was just trying all of these sort of arbitrary things. But when I just let my body decide how much fat it needs today and how much protein it needs today, then everything just works fine. And so once I started fasting, I'm like able to hear these signals much more effectively, and so be able to do them and just do what my body wants. So for me, I think that was one of the benefits that's come out of fasting. Um, yeah. So, and I would say also I had a hard time figuring out my electrolytes. Now, we do need them. How much we need is the question. And I think we're driven now to have more and more salt. And that was not good for me. So trying to unravel that and to feel comfortable in what I was having, that took a while. And it took a while to really kind of figure out what I needed.
When you talk about electrolytes, did you have problems with cramps and stuff like that, or?
No, breathing. So that was what was weird. Like if I had too much, I would get this feeling in my lungs like there was water in there, and like it was hard to breathe, and I had to work extra hard to breathe. And I think like having a lot of salt was actually drawing water into my lungs, because
Oh,
that's what it felt like. And I think I've heard that before, like people who have like congestive heart failure, some of what can happen is water gets drawn into the lungs. And how that happens, I think it can happen from a number of things, but it can happen from salt too. And actually, I know my mom has to take like a diuretic because when she doesn't, it draws water into her lungs. So I think there can be this issue of water balance in some people, and I can feel it happening with me when I do that.
And was this
So
mainly doing the diet or doing during the fasting or both?
during the fasting,
Oh, okay.
yeah. Because I think when I'm just doing the diet, like I'm not a person that takes like extra electrolytes. So I salt my food and that's it. So I think if I were like taking extra salt, because there are people who like fill up pills and they take like a lot of extra salt. If I were doing that, I would definitely have a problem. But I haven't been doing that.
Okay, and
But
getting back to the sleeping, um, so the hours of sleeping are shortened. But would you say when you woke up, you were feeling fairly well rested, or
yeah, it wasn't like I was had insomnia and wasn't getting enough rest. I just 4.5 hours was about all that I needed.
okay, yeah, because I've heard that's fairly typical. Because I mean,
Mhm.
there's also the experience of waking up in the middle of the night, it's dark, and you're kind of restless, and then you're
Yeah.
not feeling rested at all, and then you go kind of zombie through the rest of the day. But that's not what we're talking about here, right?
Yeah, no, not at all. So I would have to like make sure that I went to bed late so that I could not. No, I don't want to be up at four in the morning. Like, there's nothing to do at that point. So I would try to go to bed a little later.
It's easier to call friends over to stay up late than to call them at 4 o'clock in the morning and say, "Hey, I'm kind of lonely here. Would you show up?"
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, the fasting, once I got the electrolytes figured out, then it really was a great experience. And I dabbled a little bit and tried dry fasting, which was actually even better. I kind of liked it
Oh,
better than
really?
regular. Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's I hear that's a fairly touchy one to do.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, people get, all like freaked out about it. So I am not recommending any of your viewers do it, and certainly not do it for a long period of time. I think the longest I went was 48 hours. But so I'm not recommending you do all
So
that,
that's a
but
complete fast, no food or water for 48 hours.
mm,
That's like getting lost in the desert.
hey, I'm ready, I'm always thinking about when the apocalypse
You're a
comes.
survivalist. Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
thought of actually writing a book called The Survivalist Diet because I think a lot of the stuff I've learned from keto and carnivore would make a lot of sense. And maybe that's a nice segue to talk about these little less talked about effects of going keto and carnivore that I was really surprised about when I did the transition. One of them was a really, really heightened sense of smell. I don't know
Mhm.
if you've had that. And I mean, you're in the city in New York, so I'm sure there's all kinds of smells there. But just to compare maybe with my environment, I live in a really small town, about 8,000 people out in the mountains. And going out for nature walks is basically something you do out your back door. There's like one street and then like a huge field with old cedars and stuff like that. And what I noticed walking through the forest is I'd walk by a tree and I could smell, what felt like the inside of the tree, that sap inside the tree, and I could smell the sweetness, like the
Mhm.
sugar inside the sap of the tree. So, I almost felt like, kind of following my nose, and it was kind of like a bloodhound following a trail. And looking back at how humans could have possibly survived out in the wild without all the technology we have today, and you kind of wonder, like, we're so useless.
Mhm.
But then you kind of change and you have what I would call a much more natural diet, where you're eating what would be the equivalent of game meat and maybe a few vegetables that you can grow yourself. You're doing without all the grain and all the artificial sugar and all that. And also your sense of being part of what's in the surrounding and part of nature is completely different. So that was one of them. I don't know if you can speak to some of the experience that you've had, either that keen sense of smell, or others that you noticed.
Well, I'd forgotten until you mentioned this. I had lost my sense of smell for quite a long time. And I was living with a dog. I guess this was about 10 years ago. And, I was, I guess, allergic to dogs, or the standard American diet just so inflamed me that this was just one of the things that was was a problem for me. And so I lost my sense of smell, and then once I moved out and wasn't near the dog all the time, I was able to smell a little bit more, but not great. And so I've noticed over the years that it's definitely improved. But going on carnivore, it's like all of a sudden I can smell everything, and I was like, wow, so much I've been missing all of these years. I had no idea. So yeah, I can now smell a lot better. I
Yeah.
am able to smell things much more effectively. I don't know if I smell better. I know I've heard other carnivores talk about how they don't need to use deodorant anymore. So I have not tried that, and probably am not gonna try. But I definitely can smell other people. Def- Yeah.
Well, and one of the other things I noticed too is smelling other people's breath. But it's not, it was like, okay, bad breath smells, we can talk about, but like I'm talking, one thing I noticed, my youngest kid, and I don't impose whatever diet I'm doing on my kid, because I certainly didn't appreciate people imposing, like, if my parents imposed a certain diet or forced me to eat stuff that I didn't like. And with all the changes into what's considered healthy, they might have been very well meaning at the time, but they could have screwed me up quite a bit more, because certainly the concept of healthy food has changed quite a bit over the years. So that being said, so my youngest kid tends to eat a lot of fruit. He's basically semi Atkins, because the kids kind of pick up what we're doing. They kind of go along with it. So, when my kids are homeschooled now, when they used to go to school, we kind of force them to eat in the morning before they go to school, because we wouldn't want them to go on an empty stomach. Um, Now they're home, so they basically wake up and they'll usually read books, or you know work on whatever they want to work on in the morning, help out. We have a bit of a hobby farm here, so they help out with the animals. And sometimes they won't eat until 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's just very natural. They're like, I'm not hungry, I'll eat when I'm hungry, and we let them do that. And so there's a real natural tendency, for them anyways, to do some intermittent fasting, and they'll eat around 2 o'clock. Then they'd be good. They'll have a snack maybe before bed, and then they're good till the next day. That's kind of their typical day. But anyways, my youngest kid eats a lot of fruit. He's very fruitivore, so he'll eat his meat and all that. And he's not too keen on vegetables. He'll like a few vegetables here and there, but he really likes specific fruit. And so when I was eating carbs and I wasn't on keto, sometimes we'd be sitting together and I kind of like, oh, his breath smells kind of weird. I just kind of you know shy away a little bit. And now that I'm not, I actually pick up a lot of the sweetness from all the fruit he's eating on his breath, and it almost smells like cilantro, or citrusy. It's just like, I'm like, who has a breath like that? You're like, that's not a normal breath smell. So I noticed that changes. Another change I've noted quite a bit is going to the dentist. I don't know if you've gone through that, but as a kid, I had cavities almost every time I'd show up at the dentist. Horrible teeth, plaque everywhere. I used to eat a lot of sweets and all kinds of pastries and all that. There was no limit to what I could eat in that sense. And one of the things I noticed, even after a few weeks of doing keto and cutting carbs, is your teeth are constantly feeling you're fresh out of the dentist cleaning, right? And you show up there after a year, and they're like, wow, your teeth are like, I don't have much job to do at all, so I don't know if
Yeah.
that was your experience, but it seems to be a very common thing for people eating low carb.
Actually, I lucked out in the teeth department, and like I never had cavities when I was growing up, and never had cavities. And then for a 2-year period in my early 20s, I had 3 root canals, and then never had anything again. So, I haven't really had any trouble there. And in terms of cleanings, I generally don't have much plaque or anything like that. So yeah, so it's not like I'm not eating the candy. It's just it's eaten away at my body in a different spot. So my teeth have been fine, thankfully. But what I did notice about the dry fasting is I thought I'd have this horrible mouth and I'd be so dry,
Pasty and
but yeah, actually it was not. I brushed my teeth before I started the dry fast, and then I didn't shower or brush my teeth or anything. And yeah, even by the end of it, like my mouth didn't feel gross or dry or anything. So that was
how
great.
active did you keep during the dry fast? That's like
No,
48
I didn't
hours.
go to the gym or anything.
Huh? Yeah, just kind
Didn't
of
go to the-
chill.
Yeah, I didn't go to the gym or anything like that. So I mean, I did go to work, and so I like walked around, and I like lead classes and stuff. So I was like in front of people and talking a lot, and talking makes you lose a lot of water as well. So I was really wondering how dehydrated I might end up being, but it wasn't bad at all.
And
So
this was summertime or?
no, this was in the fall.
Okay. So
Yeah.
moderate temperatures, but still being like regular active, kind of going out, doing your thing. You didn't have to be bedridden for 48 hours to do this
Oh,
dry fast,
no,
right?
no, no.
Right on. We're coming near the end here. If you could tell me a little bit, well, your Instagram, so you're at Black Carnivores Keto.
Mhm.
So I sense a real sense of identity there in your pick of that handle for Instagram. So how long have you had that, and what was kind of the thought behind picking that out? Did you get it right off the bat, or did you have to experiment with a few names before it let you have your what you were looking for?
No, that was the first name. I mean, basically, I wanted to let other Black people who know that there's somebody else who's doing this. I feel like when I started, there really wasn't anybody of color, and so I looked for them and I didn't see them, and so I wanted it to be really easy to find me if somebody else was looking for that. And people have, and I've made every effort to reach out and communicate and be like a beacon for other people of color who are interested in following either keto or carnivore. And now there's definitely more people doing keto, and so there's a lot of places to go for that if you're looking for another Black person or Latino or whatever. But in the carnivore realm, there isn't really. There's not that many of us, and so I just am constantly looking and pulling people in. And whenever I see somebody, I reach out to them and give words of encouragement, and try to find some foods that might traditionally be called soul foods, and figuring out ways to kind of make them a little bit more carnivore. I'm actually about to publish a video. I still haven't published it, but it was me making salmon croquettes. So that was something. I mean, that's a very Southern dish, and my grandfather used to make it for most Sunday mornings, and then also like on holidays like Christmas and stuff. And so I got panko from Bacon's Air, and made from pork rinds, and so using that to make salmon croquettes, it was a way to make something that was very traditional, very Southern, and would be much appreciated by a lot of my followers, and make that so that it was a delicious thing that you can have on carnivore. So yeah, so that was the reasoning behind the name.
Well, I find that great, and yeah, it's true. I mean, if you go on YouTube and look up carnivore diet, it's very white out there.
Well,
So
and very male too, and
white
that's
male, yes.
yeah. So there definitely is that that strain that's a little bit it's it can be a little off-putting, I think, if you're not that, very I don't know. So I'm just trying to let people know that there is another way to approach it, and
Yeah,
that
and
there.
perhaps on the flip side of that as well, I think genetically there's certain populations that have responded particularly badly to the North American diet. If
Hmm.
I look at, in Canada, a lot of the native population here, they had been eating game meat and you know, uh, spending a lot of energy getting that game meat for thousands of years, and then introducing the North American diet. Um, they would eat the same way as somebody else who's from a genetic background that has been eating that way from generation to generation, and the effect is striking. You see a lot of overweightness and health issues and diabetes in certain populations. So I don't know if that's the case more with the Black population compared to some more uh, genetically European strains, but for sure, if you can kind of be the beacon to draw people into a different way, I think it's a great way to do it. I'm glad I found you, and hopefully we can do this again sometimes.
Yep.
Maybe exchange a few recipes. So let's keep
Yeah,
in touch. And
absolutely. I would love that.
thanks for sharing all that with us. Do you have any final comments for the audience? And
Well, no, just thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Definitely check out my YouTube channel, Healthy Keto Living with Ade, and follow me, subscribe, and yeah, let's just keep up the conversation.
all right, cheers. And we'll talk to you soon.
Okay,
Bye.
absolutely.